Hey everybody, Dave Hagan here. How much is enough? Enough what? That's today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagan.
Hey, thanks, Nick. This is the Financial Wellness Podcast coming at you. I'm Dave Hagan. With me today, Brian Reed. Brian, welcome.
Hi there, David. How are you?
I'm good. Always fun to get together, hang out, and talk about some of this stuff. Today, I want to talk about how much is enough? And I've been thinking about this for the last couple months. You know, recently I saw a video on YouTube, and it was a video of a TED Talk. And whenever you see a TED Talk, my first thought or impression is, here's someone talking who's smarter than me, so I better listen. Hard to get to do a TED Talk. You got to be really smart and you got to be cool. And the topic was, how much is enough? And he was talking about how much is enough income, how much is enough return on an investment, how much is enough rent on something that you rent out, how much is enough. But I started thinking about it in the more broader sense. How much is enough in so many areas of our life? Now, some of these answers to these questions are kind of easy, like in the financial realm. We've talked to all of our listeners about this. You know, 3 to 6 months income is enough for an emergency plan. 10 to 12 times annual expenses is enough for life insurance. 25 times annual expenses is enough for retirement. 7% on investments is enough if you're looking at over the long term. 0% is enough debt. I mean, some of this is kind of simple, and we like to keep it simple so that it sticks in people's minds. Financially, those are some numbers that are enough. And these are nice, easy financial rules. And I'm not a big fan of complicated calculations. You know, I saw a recent article, 2017, if you call that recent, in Forbes, written by a fellow named Scott Spann, S-P-A-N-N. Check it out. It's a great article. But he talks about calculations and ratios and index numbers. And I thought, wow, that's really cool. That's really sophisticated. That's really helpful if you'll sit down and do them. I didn't. I went, oh, okay, I get it. And I didn't. I didn't do any of the math. It's just too complicated. There's just too much to check out. And, you know, there's a ball game that's coming on, and there's stuff that I need to do, and I want to go out and walk or run or all these other things. And I just didn't take the time. But if you're the kind of person that likes to look at stuff like that, check it out. Forbes magazine, 2017, Scott Spann. But the things that I like to remember are the quick, easy things. 3 to 6 months income, emergency plan. 10 to 12 times annual expenses, life insurance. 25 times annual expenses, you can retire. 7%, good enough return on investment. You don't have to kill it. 7% is okay. If you're getting 7%, actually, you're doing pretty good. 0% debt. Easy things to remember. I could tell someone that if I walked up to them in an elevator, and that's why I like it. It's simple. But this also caused me to think about other concepts of enough in other areas of my life. How much is enough free time? I don't know. I think we could do a whole episode on that, because I always wonder, am I goofing around too much, or am I goofing around just the right amount to refresh my brain? How much is enough free time? There's tons of stuff on the internet. I'm thinking about that. We're going to do a whole show on that. How much is enough car? I don't know. But I think we all need to think about that. How much is enough house? How much is enough physical fitness or health? How much is enough vacation? interesting. How much is enough to give back? I mean, these are questions that help us balance the totality of our lives. The financial stuff, we got pretty good numbers, pretty good guidelines. But these other things in our life, how much is enough? I think it helps us balance. Now, when I was younger, man, the sky was the limit. Enough was, I wanted it all, right? You remember, Brian? How much do you want? I want it all, baby.
I want everything.
I want it all. I want a house overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I want one of them Magnum PI red Ferraris, right? I want to be 210 pounds and running daily. I want to play scratch golf. I want to retire at 40. When you're young, you want it all, and that's good. Of course, now that I'm a little older, my dream is kind of the same, except for I also want a jet. Right? We're in LA. I was driving yesterday and just bumper to bumper backed up. What a crazy, crazy thing. It was the middle of the day. Now it was a Friday, but it was the middle of the day, and it's like you can't get around. And it was probably made even worse by the fact that, the president was in town and they close off blocks of the city. But it was absurd trying to get around. So I want a jet. I'd like to have a jet. But really, how much is enough?
Well, then, isn't there also enough on the bottom end? Because you're talking about high end right now. You're talking about you want the house, you want the car, you want the jet. And come on, dude, do you really want a jet? You don't want a jet. Be honest.
No, I really would like to have a jet, but is that part of my enough? No, it's not. I'm kidding. In fact, I think that your definition of enough changes, over time. When you're younger, a lot of it's material stuff. And, as you kind of work your way through life, enough starts to talk about some of these other things, free time and experiences and, some of the other kinds of things.
Because there's enough on the top end, but flip the equation around. Think about it from the other way. Is there enough on the bottom end?
Ooh,
what is enough? Is it just, if you're in a car accident and your leg is pinned and you're bleeding out, you'll sacrifice your leg in a heartbeat,
right,
to live. I'll figure it out.
Right.
Life without a leg, fine.
Right.
But I want to live.
Right.
So life is enough.
Right. Now, I hadn't thought about it in terms of a bottom end. Wow, that blows me away.
Is there, are we making decisions on these enoughs that we believe in at the bottom end as well?
Right. Yeah, if you're going to die and you're pinned in a car and 5 minutes before, enough might have been 2 legs. And once you're in that car accident, you're stuck. Maybe enough all of a sudden, because of your circumstances, enough becomes, 1 leg. Wasn't there a movie about that where the guy was like a rock climber or something and he got pinned and Franco wasn't that a movie he was in? And he cut his leg off or his arm off.
I think he cut his arm off because he couldn't get out.
Yeah,
and he was like, I got to live.
So enough. I didn't think about that till just this minute, but enough maybe was 1 arm for him in that circumstance. So I don't know. I don't think it's the same all throughout your life, and enough has kind of changed for me over time. It kind of ebbs and flows depending upon what's going on in your life. But wow, what's enough? I think that's an important thing to ask as we are moving through our life. I don't want it to blunt anyone's drive for success, because for some people, enough might be a very high bar. But I think it's an important thing to think about in terms of keeping things in perspective. I think a little bit further down the road, you start to think of enough in terms of how hard or long you'll continue to work if you're ready to move into some other phase or do something else. But I think that this concept of enough is something to ponder and meditate and think about in terms of life balance, even. Certainly in terms of life balance. So, hey, Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. How much is enough for you?
I'd like to have 2 legs.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep that. It's like you said, it changes with almost every day, there are truths that I think exist for all of us.
Sure.
Enough is your family. That's, things that are good in and of themselves.
Or if your family's totally out there, maybe enough is just Christmas.
Just
that's family sometimes.
just Christmas and Easter and
that's right.
yeah, twice a year.
Yeah, and
That's enough with my family.
That's enough.
No, my family's awesome.
But I think it's interesting in terms of, looking at our life, our financial life, and other aspects of our life, and as we're putting together that plan, and that plan changes over time. But how much is enough?
And it's important to just be asking the question,
I think so.
because you're forcing yourself to think critically and actually not just wander through life aimlessly.
Yeah.
It's what we've talked about before on, who's driving your car.
Yeah.
Who's driving your life.
Right.
Or is, the advertisers, is your boss
Right.
driving your life, or are you driving it?
Right.
And it's these kinds of questions that, like it or not, you're in the driver's seat.
Right.
You got to drive your car. What do you care about?
Right.
You've got to think about it.
What's enough for you, and how do you put together a plan to get to that? I don't know. I think that's an interesting thing, and I've been using that question in the last couple months, ever since I saw that TED Talk over there on YouTube. How much is enough? And I think it's something to continually ponder. Don't get all freaked out, everybody. Don't be walking around in a daze going, enough. But it's something to occasionally step back to and go, wow, is that enough? How much is that? Is that enough? I don't know. The financial part's easy. It's the other part that takes a little more, thought and soul searching and perspective. I don't know. That's my thoughts on how much is enough. So let's change gears here just a little bit. Brian, last week you weren't here, and we had this guest in the studio talking about financial adversity. We had Daniel. And
If that was his real name.
If that was his real name. And he was talking about his journey down into the black hole and coming back up. You didn't see us actually doing the interview live, but you listened to it. Then what do you think about that?
It was a good interview. It was interesting to, hear it from someone who had been through it.
Right.
He's just a good dude. You could hear it in his voice, and had his family, his kids, his wife, was just trying to do the right thing, was trying to provide, and started, his own business. You got to have all of, these, normal day jobs, because he was a police officer, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And
Well,
his
he was
wife-
in enforcement. Yeah.
He was in law enforcement, and
His wife was a social worker. Yeah.
and then he started the own business to supplement the income, and life happens, and there is no blueprint for business. Every business is going to be different, and he got in trouble, and he it's not like he didn't try. It's not like he intentionally made mistakes. He did his best, and it just didn't work out for him, and he went into that dark financial hole.
Yeah. I remember, and he gave it a shot. I remember years ago I was consulting with a guy, and actually we were taking him into a bankruptcy, and he had wanted to pursue a business project, and he had put together he had licensed rights to a book, and he was going to turn it into software and sell the software, and but it didn't work out. It was a spectacular misadventure, and it ultimately put him into bankruptcy. I said, "Wow, do you regret even, thinking about this idea for this software?" And he goes, "Not at all. I'm not happy to be here at all. Don't get me wrong," but he said, "At least I tried." So many of the people I work with, we get together at lunch and they go, "Oh, if I could do this or that." And he says, none of them did that ever. They just kept showing up to work the next day. But I tried, and it didn't work, and I learned a lot, and I may try something similar down the road, knowing that I could do a better job because of all the stuff that I've learned. but he didn't regret the time or the experience at all. And it seemed to me that's what one of the messages that Daniel had from his whole experience was, I learned from it. I'm bigger, better, stronger because of it, even though it was an extremely difficult thing, I also was blown away by, he came up with some summation points at the end of the interview, and that was exactly what I had written down without even having talked to him about, what we were going to talk about.
Nice.
And I had said, well, here's some things that I would do. And I said at the top of the interview, hey, I can think of things that I would do, things that I would advise, but let's get it real from someone who went through it. And, he said, well, I understood the cause and I owned it. That was, the second thing.
He definitely owned it.
He definitely owned it. And he set up a specific plan to deal with it. It's like he was relentless almost in terms of getting back and not getting knocked down again and learning from the experience. So I thought that was pretty interesting, that we would come to some of the same kinds of conclusions from different spots. Myself being the advisor, or maybe more the academic type analysis, and his coming from the, hey, I lived it. This is my life. This is the way that it happened. I thought that was pretty interesting. Did you notice how long that interview went?
It was longer than our normal shows.
Oh, by far, yeah. Quite a bit.
It went, really? How much?
It was like 45 minutes.
Really?
47 minutes, yeah. And we try.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah. Well, we didn't even notice. We would just talk, and also we turn around. Whoa, this is longer than a TFWP is supposed to be. But I thought it was interesting, and we kind of lost track of time. I thought that was kind of interesting too. So we've got some more people that we're gonna bring in an interview on other topics, obviously, but. I thought that was pretty interesting, and we missed you, but we came up with something without you.
Hey, it was a great episode. Kudos to you guys.
No, I appreciate you being here, and you're really good, but not that good. Not that good.
But aren't we out of time here, Dave? Why am I getting my butt kicked?
Hey, we are out of time, and thank you for bringing that up. Hey, everybody, we'll talk to you next time. This is Dave Hagan, and you're listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. As an additional bonus, each month, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications. Let's listen in now as Dave answers some emails.
All right, Brian, what do we got?
Well, Dave, we've got one from Jeff. This is actually a little sad. He writes, "Hi, Dave. One of my friends recently lost his brother to suicide, leaving behind a wonderful family with 3 kids. Apparently, He had racked up a large amount of credit card debt, overextended himself, and never even told his wife. He writes, any advice? What are her responsibilities now in regards to his financial accounts?"
Wow, so sad. So sad. I'll leave behind a wife and kids. I think I'd advise you to do a number of things. First of all, get out a couple pieces of paper, and on the first piece of paper, list assets, and on the second piece of paper, list debts. See if there's any life insurance proceeds that should go on the asset side. Is there equity in the house? Is there equity in the cars? Those kinds of things. And then on the debt side, a list of all the debts, and for each debt, who signed for it, whose name is on that account. Not who was an authorized user on the card necessarily, but whose name came on the account, because we need to know who's responsible for that. And then we need to know what assets are responsible for paying some of those debts. And then she really needs to go and sit down with with an attorney or an accountant, and kind of schedule that out. And it's going to vary from state to state. States have different laws. This might be analyzed and discussed differently in a community property state, which are primarily states in the western part of the United States, as opposed to states back east. But if she's not contractually liable, there might be some ways that she could not have to worry about that debt. If her name is on all the debt and she signed and used that, of course it says, I guess the email says she didn't know, that might be a different analysis. And then the thought is, how much of the assets, of the various assets, are available to satisfy that debt? If there's not a lot of assets, it might be that there's nothing to do. Or if her name is on the debt, it might be that a bankruptcy is something that might be in order. But she's going to have to get her arms around, both those situations, assets and liabilities, and then sit down and talk with someone and come up with a plan. Wow, pretty tough. It's all on her, and we wish her all the best.
Dave, we've got an audio clip next, I think. Let me cue it up here.
Hello, Dave. This is Matt from La Cañada, longtime listener, first-time caller, 61 years old, gone through a long-term marriage divorce now, and starting over again. And the big question for me is, I certainly want to, as you mentioned very early on in your early episodes, create an emergency fund, but I'm not even sure who I go to for that. For example, do I put it in a bank? I started looking at places like Ally online because it looks like they have some things that can produce some minor or small amounts of interest. Anyway, very curious as to hear your opinion and your advice as to what do you do when you're starting over later in life. Thank you very much. Enjoy your show. Take care. Bye.
Hey, thanks for the audio question, Matt. Appreciate it. Wow, kind of bummer on the divorce, or maybe congratulations on the divorce, whatever the circumstances may be, and congratulations on coming out and moving up on the upside now. So pretty exciting time in your life. Also, wow, congratulations on getting a hold of cash flow and starting to put some money together for an emergency fund. The hardest part about an emergency fund is holding back those first dollars for yourself. Easy to talk about, but talk is cheap. You're doing it, and that's really cool. So I think your question is, where do you put the money? And I can think of a couple of things. First and foremost, you could put it in your pocket. But you're not going to accrue any interest, right? And if it's in your pocket, if you're anything like me, you're going to want to spend it, because I'm a spending kind of guy, So I wouldn't do that. I mean, you could keep it as a reserve in your checking account. Wouldn't do that, because you'll spend it. If you're anything like me, you don't want to keep too much of a balance in your checking account. Move it off to a savings account. Well, now we're starting to get a little warm. You could just go to a bank and put it in a savings account. You get a separate statement. Don't even necessarily look at the statement every month. Just keep putting the money in there until you know that you've got enough for your your emergency reserve. I like that. You'll get a little bit of interest. Banks aren't paying a lot on savings accounts, but it's a possibility. You could go to a brokerage house, and no, don't buy stocks with it, but a brokerage house. Brokerage house they have savings account kind of devices. They have accounts that are connected to the Dow Jones. They, and again, you don't want to be in stocks, but they're pretty fluid. So I think those are the kinds of things to look at. And there's places, there's Schwab, there's Ameritrade, there's all these places. You don't want to be in a fund that you can't get at, but they have liquid funds, and they'll pay you interest, probably a little better than you'll get on a savings account. Going back to the bank, you could do a CD, but if you break the CD, then you don't get the interest, and I wouldn't do that. I think I like, brokerage account. I think you said Ally in the question. Probably not a bad choice, although I know very little about them specifically, so check them out. But I think that, some kind of an account that you're going to get a little better than a savings, but it's got to be definitely liquid. You have to set it up so that you can get to it at a moment's notice if need be. But I love your thought process. I love the question. Appreciate you being a long-term listener. And if you got any more questions, call in. We'd love to hear from you again. It sounds like you're kind of taking this to heart, Matt. And I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm digging it.
It's well done, buddy. Well done. Keep it up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We got any more time, Brian?
We are out of time.
Let's wrap it up then. Hey, check back in the next couple of weeks. We're working on a couple of things you might find really interesting. I want to do one of the next couple of shows about this concept of how much is enough free time, leisure time. Too much, too little? You watching a little too much TV, too much Kardashian show, if you know what I mean? Or are you not allowing yourself enough time to relax? I've always found that an interesting balance, and I want to spend some time with Brian kind of talking it through and hashing it out. So that's coming up. Stay tuned. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.